The air was thick with smoke and the sour sting of plasma, burned metal, scorched bone, and the silence of the dead. Those were the only things that greeted Commander Reed as he crawled out from under the wreckage of his downed gunship. His vision blurred, but the memory was sharp. They said they'd hold the line. They said reinforcements were coming. They lied. It wasn't just betrayal, it was slaughter. The Dorian Alliance had promised unity, promised support. But when the Zarnak fleet hit ground zero on Kesar 9, they didn't send ships. They didn't even answer the calls. They watched. They let it happen. And they let us die. 20,000 human troops, cut off, surrounded, and erased from history like we were just pawns to be thrown away. Reed knew because he'd watched the feeds himself as their ships turned and left orbit. He remembered the flashes in the sky, each one another promise broken, another brother dead. He lay among the twisted bodies of his squad, most of them burned beyond recognition, the earth beneath soaked in blackened blood. His own leg was shattered. He tore a strip of someone's uniform, tied it around the limb, and screamed as he set the bone against a charred tree stump. The pain didn't matter. Not now. Pain meant he was alive. And if he was alive, it meant they would pay. Reed wasn't the kind of man to speak big words. He wasn't a politician or a diplomat. He was a soldier, a fighter, and now a man with nothing left to lose. The next few days were a blur of crawling, hiding, and scavenging. The Zarnaks thought they'd cleared the planet, thought they'd wiped out the last human unit. But Reed stayed low, using the chaos to steal weapons, raid rations, and plant explosives in every ship hangar he could reach. When he finally managed to hijack a supply freighter and escape orbit, Kesar 9 was burning in his rear-view screen. He made sure of it. But what came next? That's what no one expected. He didn't return to Earth. There was nothing left there for him but folded flags and empty graves. He went dark, off-grid. He sought out the mercenary rings on the outer rim, the ones too violent for the Coalition to control. He found other survivors, men like him, abandoned, forgotten, angry. They didn't need convincing. Every one of them had a story. Everyone had a scar. And so the fire began to spread. One planet at a time. That was the rule. Not a war, a purge. First was Drexelon, a Dorian fuel colony. They hid it under cover of the comet belt, dropped in silent, left only smoke and ruins. Then came Yaller Prime, a trade station that used to serve both human and alien ships. Not anymore. Then they took Haven's Reach, then Torga Station, then Delvax. By the time the Dorian media called it terrorism, they'd already lost 6 sectors. They tried to spin it, said it was a rogue unit, said humans had gone mad. But those weren't madmen. They were soldiers with cause. Every planet they took, they left a message. You left us. We remember. Reed didn't care about politics. He didn't care about power. He wanted names, wanted them to feel it like he did. Not just war, loss. And deep in the shadows, the human fleet began to stir again, quietly, carefully. The old warships were coming out of mothballs. The cryovaults were waking their long-dormant pilots. Earth hadn't spoken yet, but Reed knew it was watching. Because this wasn't just revenge anymore. This was reclamation. By the time Commander Reed stepped onto the scorched surface of Halvor 7, he no longer needed to explain who he was. The ground beneath his boots was fresh ash, and the air hung heavy with ozone. His ship, a repurposed Dorian dropship now marked with deep-cut human insignia and raw black paint, hissed as its landing gear settled. Around him, other vessels began to descend, not in military formation, but like wolves circling prey. This wasn't an army bound by politics or polished chain of command. This was a collective of ghosts, survivors, mercenaries, exiles, and deserters. they had only one common cause: vengeance. Halvor 7 was once a neutral zone, supposedly protected by the same alliance that had left his brothers to die on Kesar 9. Now it was a weapons depot for the Dorians, hidden from the rest of the galaxy under 1,000 bureaucratic lies. Reed didn't need approval or clearance to strike, just intel, a plan, and a reason. And he'd had the reason since the day he pulled himself out of a crater full of his dead men. He stood in front of the gathered strike team. No grand speech, no moral slogans, just a nod. They knew what they were here for. "They buried us in silence," he said quietly, eyes scanning the dozen hard-faced men standing before him. "Let's remind them why we were dangerous in the first place." No one cheered. This wasn't a celebration. This was justice long overdue. The team moved like shadows through the outer trenches of Halvor 7, disabling defense grids with repurposed Dorian tech, leaving behind nothing but scorched metal and silent corpses. They didn't waste bullets. Every shot had a name, every kill a purpose. Reed moved with ruthless efficiency, clearing corridors, leaving marks on the walls in black soot, a human skull scratched in blood, a message for the cowards watching from their satellites. "You left us." As the inner hangar doors blew open and the last line of resistance crumbled under suppressed fire, Reed walked up to the facility commander, a sniveling Dorian official with silver-lined robes and a half-burned face. He'd been trying to flee in an escape pod. Reed shot out the thrusters before he made it more than 3 feet off the ground. "Please!" the alien gasped, his breathing ragged and desperate. "We were under orders." "So were we," Reed interrupted coldly. "You know the difference? We didn't leave our allies to die." He didn't pull the trigger immediately. He wanted the man to know exactly why, to feel the weight of every voice silenced on Kesar 9. Then, one clean shot to the head. No mercy, no more bargaining, just truth, delivered with steel. Back aboard the freighter, Reed stood at the observation bay, watching the surface of Halvor 7 collapse beneath a chain of timed charges. The facility imploded inward, a red glow spreading like veins through concrete. It wouldn't be salvageable. And that was the point. Word was spreading across the rim. One by one, planets started going dark. Smugglers refused Dorian credits. Shipyards denied alien fleets. Human sympathizers within the system began slipping Reed information, flight logs, command rosters, hidden bunkers. Every betrayal the Dorians thought buried was now a thread Reed was pulling with surgical fury. But it wasn't just the Dorians anymore. The Zarnaks, the very race who'd broken the treaty with that surprise attack on Kesar 9, had begun pushing further out into the mid-sectors. Humanity's refusal to die had caught their attention again. And this time, Reed wasn't a soldier in someone else's war. He was the war. Back on the rogue ship Black Sun, Reed met with his second, a grizzled ex-scout sniper named Morgan who'd lost his entire family in the aftermath of the Kesar betrayal. The two rarely spoke beyond necessity, but tonight they sat in the war room, maps flickering before them, planets marked in blood red and cold blue. "We hit 5 supply chains in 2 weeks, Morgan said. "They're starting to panic. Got chatter from a hacked relay. Dorian High Command is debating pulling out of 3 systems." "Not enough," Reed replied. "I want them scared to take a piss without watching the shadows." Morgan gave a dry chuckle. "We're getting attention. Earth's defense fleet pinged a coded message 2 hours ago." Reed turned sharply. "Earth? They're watching us. Maybe not officially, but someone's listening." Reed nodded slowly. "Good. Let them listen. We do the dirty work they won't admit needs doing." He stared at the flickering icon of their next target. Velos Station, a diplomatic hub between Zarnak and Dorian trade routes, supposedly neutral. But he had the records and the names. They had signed the order to retreat from Kesar, sold out human lives in exchange for resource access. They thought no one would ever find the comm logs. Reed had found them, and now they'd pay in kind. The strike on Velos wasn't surgical. It was a message. Reed's fleet, now 12 ships strong, each one retrofitted with stolen Dorian and human tech, dropped from orbit like thunder. No warning, no negotiations. They disabled the orbital defenses in less than 2 minutes, swept through the docking bays, and stormed the council chambers while alien delegates screamed for security that never arrived. They didn't kill everyone, just the ones who signed the treaty. Reed personally executed the station's chief administrator, a bloated Zarnak with coward's blood and gold-plated tusks. As the alien tried to bribe his way out with promises of wealth and hidden information, Reed leaned in and whispered, "Kesar 9, look it up." Then the blade went in, clean and slow. As the fleet pulled out, leaving Velos burning and shattered, Reed sat alone in the captain's quarters of the Black Sun. He stared at a single data chip, the original tactical orders from the Alliance Council, with every human battalion's position exposed. It wasn't just abandonment. It was a setup. They'd used the humans as a distraction, as bait, sacrificed them to protect alien cities deeper in the core. The cost was acceptable, they wrote. Acceptable. He closed his eyes. The screams of his squad still echoed in his head, their faces burned into his memory. Men who trusted him. Men who died thinking help was coming. Never again. That night, a transmission from Earth came through. Not public, not traceable, just a voice, a human one, older, worn. "Reed, we see what you're doing. Officially, we condemn these actions. Unofficially, keep going. No name, no rank, just permission." Reed didn't need more. He walked onto the bridge, looked out at the vast emptiness of space. So many stars, so many targets. He tapped the console. "Bring me the next list," he said. And somewhere in the cold dark between galaxies, war drums began to beat again. This time not for survival, but for vengeance. The Dorians were no longer silent. For weeks they tried to contain the narrative, calling Reed a terrorist, a fringe war criminal, a relic from a broken military. But words didn't hold ground, and speeches didn't stop ships from burning in orbit. Now their convoys moved with escorts, their trade fleets armed to the teeth, and their border stations bristled with defense grids that hummed with anxious energy. And still, it wasn't enough. Reed's fleet was no longer a ghost force. It had grown, fed by the quiet fury of men who had nothing left to protect, except their honor. More ex-soldiers joined by the week, smugglers tired of being disposable, mercenaries with codes of their own. Even a few Earth officers, unofficially, of course, had begun leaking tactical data, providing ship coordinates and clearance codes. They called themselves the Forgotten. No banners, no anthem, just blood and steel. Their latest conquest, the fuel-rich moon of Arctilon, had sent a message far louder than any comm transmission. They didn't just take it, they stripped it, every tank emptied, every storage bay looted. And then, in the center of the command station, they left a monument, a pile of burnt alien flags, and at the top, a helmet from Kesar 9, melted and scarred. The Dorian High Council convened under emergency lockdown in the fortified citadel on Cresher Prime. They argued for hours, days. Some wanted peace talks, others called for the extermination of all human colonies outside Earth's jurisdiction. But none of them had answers. Because this wasn't a war they understood. This wasn't about planets, it wasn't about resources. It was personal. Reed sat in the dim light of the war room aboard Black Sun, sifting through the latest reports. Morgan leaned against the bulkhead, reading from a cracked data slate. They've pulled 2 fleets from the Zarnak border. One's reinforcing Sector 9. The other's heading toward Calveron's Reach. Guess they think we'll hit that trade hub next. Reed didn't look up. We're not. Morgan raised a brow. We're not. No, Reed said. We're going after their comms relay on Tyrus 4. Morgan whistled low. That's deep space. Heavy grid. Why? Reed turned the screen toward him. Because that's where they broadcast the original retreat order. That's where they called us expendable. Morgan's expression darkened. You sure you want to poke that hornet's nest? Reed finally looked up, and the fire in his eyes was something Morgan had seen only once before. The day they buried 30 men in a crater and lit it with fire because there was no one left to take them home. We're not poking it, Reed said. We're tearing it open. Preparations began immediately. Tyrus 4 wasn't just a relay station. It was a nexus. From there, the Dorian command could reach every corner of their fleet. If Reed took it, they wouldn't just lose control of their systems. They'd lose control of the narrative. No more blaming rogue humans. No more hiding behind protocols. This would expose the whole game. The strike team assembled was smaller than usual. Speed mattered more than numbers. They couldn't afford to trigger the outer defenses. Every move had to be surgical. Every shot counted. Reed, Morgan, and a handful of hardened specialists boarded the stealth cruiser Widow Fang, a sleek, black plate vessel with silent engines and cloaking tech, so sensitive it could pass within 300 meters of a patrol ship without being seen. It was stolen tech, of course, human ingenuity wrapped in Dorian arrogance. As they slipped into Tyrus space, tension hung thick. One wrong signal, one glitch, and the entire mission would collapse under plasma fire. Reed kept his focus sharp. He'd studied the relay's schematics for days. He knew every vent shaft, every emergency override, every patrol pattern. At 0300 ship time, they docked in a hidden maintenance port on the far side of the moon. From there, it was boots on metal, weapons drawn, hearts steady. They moved like phantoms. Security was tight, but predictable. The Dorians hadn't adapted yet. They still thought like an empire. Rigid schedules, automated sweeps, arrogance in uniform. The first kill was silent, a guard strangled behind a fuel core. The second was quicker, a knife across a throat, body dumped in the coolant pit. Reed didn't allow emotion to cloud the mission. These weren't executions, they were steps, just steps toward the signal room. By the time they reached the main broadcast hall, 4 guards lay dead, and the corridor lights were flickering under a quiet EMP they'd set 2 levels down. Morgan disabled the primary comm line while Reed accessed the archive logs. He wasn't just here to sabotage. He wanted evidence. There it was. Clear as glass. Retreat all human forces to Outer Rim. Kessar 9 to be held as buffer. Acceptable loss margin 94%. It hit harder than he expected. Reading it. Seeing it in cold, bureaucratic language. As if lives could be measured in percentages. As if his friends, his men, were just fuel in a numbers game. He downloaded the logs, every one of them, and rerouted a copy to every major comm channel within 3 sectors, encrypted but traceable. Then he planted the charges. When they pulled out 30 minutes later, the broadcast tower behind them bloomed with fire and twisted steel. No way to hide it now. Back aboard Black Sun, Reed watched the fallout unfold. The data went viral. Human colonies saw it. Civilians saw it. Even neutral species that once supported the Dorians paused to ask questions. And Earth? Earth issued a single statement. Investigations ongoing. But behind closed doors, more human ships began to drift from dry dock. More officers began retiring early, and the Defense Council reactivated long-forgotten codes from the days of the Outer Rim conflicts. Reed had started something they could no longer ignore. But not everyone saw him as a hero. An intercepted Dorian message hit his desk the next day. It was a bounty, a high one, the largest ever placed on a human head. Commander Reed, wanted for acts of terrorism, war crimes, and destabilization of galactic peace. Morgan laughed when he saw it. War crimes. That's rich. Reed didn't laugh. He looked at the number, the desperation behind it, and the name at the bottom. General Thalos Krev, the same Dorian commander who had ordered the retreat from Kessar 9. Finally, a face, a real enemy. And suddenly the war felt personal again. As Black Sun turned toward their next target, the fortified command station on Archon 5, Reed stood at the viewport, eyes locked on the void ahead. This wasn't about planets anymore. It was about names, about debts, about a promise made in blood and silence. He wasn't just taking territory. He was taking back dignity, one corpse at a time. The name Thalos Krev burned into Reed's mind like a brand. Every time he closed his eyes, it was there, etched alongside the screams, the blood, the broken bones of Kessar 9. That name wasn't just a target. It was the key to all of it. The betrayal, the retreat order, the cold dismissal of human lives for alien interests. Krev was the general who'd signed the command and watched from orbit as men like Reed bled in the dirt. And now he was hiding behind fleets, behind politics, behind layers of security on the fortified world of Archon V. But Reed was done playing war. This wasn't conquest anymore. This was a hunt. Black Sun moved through space like a loaded gun, engines humming with coiled power, the crew silent but alert. Everyone aboard knew what this was. No resources, no colonies, just one name. A Dorian war general in a palace of glass and guns, who believed himself untouchable. Morgan entered the war room as Reed reviewed orbital scans of Archon 5. The planet was a fortress, layered atmospheric shields, orbital cannon platforms, and 2 full squadrons of Dorian interceptors on constant patrol. On the surface, it was worse. Krev's palace sat on a high mountain ridge surrounded by 3 defensive walls, AI gun nests, and a private guard unit known as the Cinder Guard, cyber-enhanced killers trained to feel no fear, no hesitation. "You sure this isn't suicide?" Morgan asked, leaning over the console. Reed didn't answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the blinking heat signatures inside the structure. One of them was Krev. "We've died before," Reed muttered. "What's one more time if we take the devil with us?" Morgan gave a sharp nod. "Then we hit hard, hit fast, no speeches." "No survivors," Reed added. "They couldn't go in with the full fleet. That would trigger planetary lockdown. They had to strike with precision." Reed took only a single dropship, disguised as a Dorian patrol craft they'd captured 2 weeks earlier. 6 men. That was it. All ex-commando, no questions asked. All of them had something lost on Kessar. All of them volunteered. As they approached Archon Phi's outer orbit, the forged credentials got them within range. The Dorian traffic control didn't even blink. Just another patrol ship running diagnostics. Another lie in the system. Reed stood in the drop bay, armor sealed, weapons locked, watching the mountainous landscape of Archon 5 crawl beneath them. "This place feels like a grave," one of the soldiers muttered. "It will be," Reed replied. The insertion was flawless. They landed in a maintenance zone along the eastern wall, hidden from the main towers. From there they moved like ghosts, cutting through fences, disabling cameras, killing guards with swift, silenced precision. The Cinder Guard hadn't detected them yet. Reed knew they wouldn't get far without setting off alarms. The idea wasn't to escape. The idea was to get close enough, and then burn it all. Inside the palace, the air was cold and sterile. The walls were sleek obsidian, and the hallways pulsed with soft blue lights. It didn't feel like a military post. It felt like arrogance, the kind of place built by someone who thought he'd already won. Reed and his team moved through the corridors, cutting down any resistance. The firefights were quick, brutal, each shot a message, each kill another name erased from the list of traitors. Then they reached the command wing. Reed placed the charges on the blast doors himself. When they blew, it wasn't just steel that cracked. It was the illusion of safety Krev had wrapped himself in. Inside, General Thalos Krev stood in the center of a marble floor, draped in ceremonial armor, flanked by 2 Cinderguard elites. His face didn't change when he saw Reed. No fear, no recognition. Just that same cold calculation that had killed thousands. "I wondered when you'd come," Krev said, his voice deep and oily. "You didn't wonder hard enough," Reed replied. The Cinderguard stepped forward, but Reed already had his rifle raised. The first one dropped with 2 shots to the throat and a blade through the spine. The second charged, but Morgan met him head-on, driving a shock baton into the cyborg's chest, shorting out its neural links. The body dropped with a heavy thud. Now it was just Reed and Krev. "You think this matters?" Krev said, slowly circling the room. "You think killing me changes anything?" Reed walked toward him, slow and deliberate. "Number, I think it's a start." Krev smirked. "You're nothing but a butcher-playing hero." Reed stopped inches from him. "And you're the coward who hid behind numbers while my brothers died." Krev's eyes finally flickered. Maybe recognition. Maybe regret. Maybe just fear finally catching up. "You think vengeance gives you purpose?" he hissed. "You've turned your people into savages." Reed leaned in, voice low and steady. "Number, I reminded them they weren't slaves." He didn't give Krev the satisfaction of a dramatic death. No slow monologue, just one clean shot between the eyes. The body crumpled, armor clattering on the floor. Reed turned to his team. "Burn it." They wired the command wing with explosives, taking every data core, every terminal, every trace of Krev's operations. The blast ripped through the palace in a wave of fire and light as Black Sun swooped in for extraction, guns blazing, shielding them from the chaos below. They left Archon 5 in ruins, and Reed finally felt something he hadn't in years. Stillness. It wasn't peace. Peace was a lie, but it was something close, like a wound no longer bleeding. Back aboard the ship, the crew didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, just silence. Some nodded. Others stared at the stars. Everyone knew what it meant. The architect of Kisar 9's betrayal was dead. But the war was far from over. Earth was stirring. Reed received a secure transmission later that night, coded, buried under layers of encryption, but undeniably from Earth's Shadow Command. "We see you. We won't stop you, but you're on your own. Finish what you started. No support, no backup, just recognition." And that was all Reed needed. He stood on the bridge of Black Sun, eyes fixed on the galaxy map as red markers blinked into place. There were still systems under Dorian control, still names on the list, still men and women buried in silence. But now the silence was breaking, and the fire was spreading. The galaxy no longer whispered Reed's name. It roared it. After the execution of General Thalos Krev and the obliteration of Archon V's command center, the Dorian alliance shifted from defense to desperation. Civil unrest broke out across their colonies, Human settlements once under surveillance began rising up. Trade routes faltered. Mercenaries, once loyal to the Dorian credit, now refused contracts involving human targets. And deep in the corners of space, old ghosts stirred. Not alien, but human. Black Sun drifted through the void near a dead sector known only by its war-era code, Delta 14. Once a staging ground during the outer conflicts, now just debris and silence. But today, it hosted something else. Something Reed didn't fully trust. A meeting. The signal had come through a scrambled transmission. No identification, no demand. Just coordinates, encrypted with a human cipher used only by Earth's Black Ops divisions over a decade ago, back when wars were fought without cameras, and soldiers like Reed disappeared for months with no records. Morgan hated the idea. "You really gonna walk into a room with people who left us to die?" he growled, arms crossed on the bridge. "If they wanted me dead," Reed replied coldly, "they'd have done it already." He left his weapons behind. Not out of trust, but as a message. He wasn't there to negotiate. He was there to listen, just long enough to learn who was pulling strings in the shadows. The rendezvous was a stealth corvette, sleek, silent, its markings scrubbed. Inside, Reed found only one man. An older officer, gray hair, cybernetic spine, eyes that had seen too much and regretted too little. "Commander," the man greeted, "or do you prefer Ghost of Kessar now?" Reed didn't smile. "Cut the theater." The man nodded. "Fair enough. My name's not important. What matters is we're both on the same page." "No," Reed said, "we're not." The officer leaned forward. "We gave you space, Reed. Let you build your crusade. Now things are tipping. Earth can't afford to stay neutral forever, but there's a way to end this that doesn't leave our side crippled." Reed narrowed his eyes. "Your side?" "You've been fighting for justice. I respect that," the man said. "But wars need endings, and we need you to steer this one the right way." Reed stayed silent. The officer continued. "We're offering support, intel, safe harbors, even unofficial firepower, but in return we want restraint." Reed almost laughed. "Restraint?" he echoed. "After Kessar?" "You can't kill your way to peace, Reed. Eventually, someone's got to build what's left." Reed stood, his tone turning ice cold. "You didn't come here to help. You came here to leash me." The officer's jaw tightened. "We came here to keep the galaxy from burning itself out." Reed walked to the hatch without another word. As he left, he paused just long enough to throw a final truth over his shoulder. "Krev is dead. That was restraint." He returned to Black Sun, mind heavy. This war had never been about alliances, but now it was clear. Earth didn't want him to win. They wanted him to contain the damage, not finish the fight. Back on the bridge, Morgan waited. "Well?" he asked. Reed shook his head. "They're scared. Not of us. Of what comes after us." Morgan grunted. "They should be." 3 days later, one of their forward scouts sent a priority alert. A Dorian convoy was moving through Sector Delta 9, headed towards the neutral zone. Normally, this wouldn't matter. Except this convoy had an escort of Zarnak warships. That changed everything. "Thought the Dorians hated the Zarnaks," Morgan muttered as they analyzed the feed. "They did," Reed said, "until they started losing. The Zarnaks were brutal, but efficient, and they had no moral high ground to defend. They didn't care about optics, public opinion, or treaties. They wanted territory, control, blood. Now the Dorians were selling out their sovereignty for protection." Reed felt his pulse tighten. "They're forming a pact," he said. "A new alliance." Morgan cursed. If they pool fleets, we'll be outgunned 5-1. Reed didn't flinch. Then we hit the convoy before it reaches neutral space. It was a bold move. Dangerous. If they attacked before the pact was formalized, they could still isolate the Dorians and fracture the alliance. But if the pact was sealed, the war would change forever. The attack was planned in under 6 hours. No time for perfection. Just speed and impact. Reed took Black Sun and 2 support vessels, Iron Shade and Gutter Knife. All 3 were fast, heavily armed, and crewed by men who didn't need reasons anymore. Just orders. They intercepted the convoy in deep space, just outside the neutral zone. The moment they decloaked, all hell broke loose. Lasers ripped through the void. Explosions lit the black like a storm of fireflies. Reed maneuvered Black Sun into the center of the formation, cutting through shields, targeting engines, leaving nothing but wreckage in their wake. The Zarnax responded with brutal counterstrikes, but Reed's crew had been fighting in blood for months. They knew how to bleed without dying. One by one, the Zarnak ships fell. The Dorian command ship tried to retreat. Reed followed it personally, boarded it, and tore the command bridge apart with close quarters fury. The ambassador on board begged for mercy. "We were only trying to preserve peace," he cried. Reed shot him in the leg. "You don't get peace," he said. "You get to remember." Then he left him alive. Let him crawl. Let him go home and tell his people what happens when you invite devils to dance. The message was sent. But the consequences came fast. Earth issued a formal denouncement within the hour. Reckless, unapproved, a violation of galactic neutrality. And privately, another message. You're off the leash now. Whatever happens next, you're on your own. Reed stared at the message, deleted it. He'd been on his own since Kessar 9. Now he just had fewer illusions. Back aboard Black Sun, he stood on the bridge, watching the stars shift, the wreckage float behind them, the future dim but burning. The galaxy was changing. Lines were blurring, allies were thinning, and the only thing left that made sense was the war. The stars over Sector 17 burned red. Not metaphorically. Literally. A chain of destroyed satellites and crippled defense outposts now glowed like dying embers, smeared across the sky as warning markers, a message left by the Zarnax. Reed didn't need a translation. They were answering. The ambush in Delta 9 had humiliated them, not just militarily, but publicly. The Zarnax valued strength above all else, and Reed had made them bleed. Badly. They'd underestimated him, dismissed humanity as fractured and weak, as expendable tools in a Dorian trade deal. Now they understood, and their response was to burn. 2 human colonies gone within 30 hours, civilians, no soldiers, no fleets, just farming towns and water stations, vaporized, no warning, no demands. Reed stood on the deck of Black Sun as the casualty reports came in. His jaw locked tight, his hands behind his back, staring at the distant footage, the skeletal remains of what used to be settlements, children's toys melted into dust, craters where homes once stood. "They're not trying to send a message," Morgan said, standing beside him. "They're trying to erase us." Reed didn't reply. He couldn't. Something inside him had started to go quiet, not cold, but numb. He didn't feel rage anymore, not like before. It was deeper now, like something inside had been carved out and replaced with stone. "They'll hit the next colony in under 12 hours, Morgan added. "Kenswick Station. It's unarmed. You know what that means." Reed didn't blink. "Then we beat them there." He turned from the screen, and the entire bridge crew snapped into motion. There was no argument, no hesitation. Everyone aboard had signed on to the Forgotten knowing the cost. Most had lost everything already. The war had taken their homes, their families, their peace. All that remained was duty. They reached Keswick Station with minutes to spare. A small orbital platform, mostly agricultural logistics. Nothing valuable, nothing strategic. Just people, just survivors trying to rebuild what the Dorians had once stolen. The Zarnak ships came in low. 6 war cruisers in a tight formation, heavy with atmosphere-slicing plating and burn cannons that had already erased 2 towns without resistance. But this time, there was resistance. Reed's fleet was waiting. Black Sun and 4 other ships, Iron Shade, Widowfang, Barrow Edge, and the newly joined Furnace Pike, didn't wait for the Zarnaks to speak. They opened fire first. No hails, no diplomacy, no surrender offered. The battle was savage. Plasma lit the void like a storm. Shields cracked. Hulls groaned. Reed's voice echoed through comms. Calm, steady, surgical. Focus fire on the lead cruiser. Disable targeting systems. Don't let them sweep the station. Morgan manned the flank guns himself, taking out 2 missile bays before they could unload. The Furnace Pike lost half its aft under barrage, but held the line, spinning like a wounded predator, biting back harder. Inside the command deck, Reed's fingers flew across the targeting grid. He watched every movement, every blast. The fight wasn't just firepower, it was memory. Precision born from pain. 1 Zarnak ship broke formation, circling toward Keswick. No, Reed muttered. He rerouted power to the main cannon. The blast caught the cruiser broadside. Shields flared, then failed. The vessel cracked like an egg, spilling flames and bodies into orbit. Within minutes, 3 Zarnak ships were gone. The others tried to retreat. Reed didn't let them. They hunted them down, drove them into asteroid belts, pinned them to gravity wells, killed the engines, then finished them. By the time the smoke cleared, Keswick Station was safe. But the cost was rising. Furnace Pike was nearly totaled. 17 crew dead, 40 injured. Fuel reserves down by 60%. They had won, but they couldn't keep winning like this. Back in the war room, Reed stood over the galactic map. Morgan was at his side, bruised, bleeding from a graze to his neck. "This isn't war anymore," Morgan said. "This is extermination." Reed didn't answer. He was staring at something else, a signal buried beneath layers of encrypted chatter. A whisper from Earth. It was a location. Unregistered. No message, just coordinates in the far edges of the neutral zone. "Another meeting?" Morgan asked. Reed nodded. "This one's different." "What makes you think it's not a trap?" Reed turned, voice low. "Because they used a dead code." Morgan frowned. "Kesar fallback?" Reed confirmed with a silent nod. That code hadn't been used since before the retreat. It meant only one thing. Someone from his old unit was still alive. They took Widow Fang, small, fast, quiet. No fleet. Just Reed and Morgan. The location turned out to be a drifting station, dark and silent, locked in orbit around a dead star. Its beacon was decades old, forgotten, abandoned, until now. Inside, they found a single room lit by a portable power core. And one man. Reed stopped cold when he saw him. "Calder," he breathed. Calder had been 2nd Platoon's sniper, presumed dead in the siege of Kesar's eastern front. But here he stood, older, thinner, one eye replaced with cyber optics, one arm missing, but alive. "I saw the broadcasts," Calder said. "Didn't think it was really you." Reed stared hard. "Why didn't you make contact?" Calder shrugged. "Didn't think there was anything left to come back to. until now. He pulled up a data slate. You need to see this. The file contained sensor records, black box recoveries, intercepted transmissions. Proof. The Zarnax weren't just retaliating, they were building something. A central command hub deep in the spiral sector, hidden under a synthetic black hole cluster. Their true leadership. Not just warlords, the architects of the new alliance. They're planning full-scale conquest, Calder said. Kessler was just a test. They want Earth, not diplomacy, control. Reed absorbed it in silence. They'll move once the Dorians stabilize, Calder continued, and Earth's already fractured. The Council doesn't have a plan. They had one, Reed said bitterly. It was to let us die. Calder looked at him. Then we make our own. As they returned to Black Sun, Reed knew everything had changed. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was survival. And the line he had walked, the one between justice and madness, was getting thinner every day. He stood in front of his crew that night, faces battered, tired, loyal. They're coming for us, Reed said, and Earth is blind. We either sit back and wait for the fire, or we take the fight straight into the heart of it. Silence. Then Morgan stepped forward. Just say the word. And Reed did. Next stop, Spiral Sector. The Spiral Sector was a graveyard. Even before the war, few ships dared pass through it. Black holes drifted like silent predators, magnetic storms tore apart navigation, and sensor ghosts flickered across every screen like whispers of the dead. Now, it was something worse. The heart of Zarnak Command. Reed had seen the recon from Calder's data slate, deep scan footage, satellite wreckage, escape logs from ships that never should have gotten out. Somewhere in that swirling chaos, beneath the artificial gravity wells and fractured moons, sat the Zarnak Overmind. Their command nexus, their war nerve, hidden behind layers of deception, technology, and fear. Black Sun entered the sector alone. No fleet, no support. Just Reed, Morgan, and a handful of operatives who volunteered knowing the odds meant death. But Reed wasn't looking for survival. He was looking to end it. Inside the briefing room, Morgan leaned over the schematics they'd pieced together from salvaged Zarnak logs. This, he said, tapping the rotating structure on screen. This is where the orders originate? Reed nodded. Cloaked facility, half buried under asteroid shielding. One entrance, one reactor core. Morgan exhaled. It's a death trap. It's also our only shot. They suited up, no one speaking, just checking weapons, syncing comms, triple-checking ammo. The air was thick, not with fear, but finality. Everyone aboard knew what this was. Not a mission, a reckoning. The drop pod launched through a gravitational crack between twin black holes, using the energy pulse to slingshot them past the sensor barrier. The facility loomed below like a parasite. Veins of steel wrapped around a hollowed asteroid, defense turrets pulsing, drones flickering in coordinated orbit. The pod landed hard, skidding across jagged rock before cracking open. Gunfire erupted instantly. Reed was first out, plasma rifle barking, taking down 2 sentry drones mid-hover. Morgan followed, laying suppression fire while the others fanned out. They advanced fast, breaching the outer perimeter, burning through doors, clearing rooms with silent fury. Inside, the air was colder than space, stale, dry, humming with unnatural vibrations. Zarnak bodies fell in every corridor. Their warriors were vicious but not prepared for this kind of human precision. This wasn't rebellion. This was a hit. They reached the command chamber in under 15 minutes. Bodies behind them, alarms screaming. At the center of the room stood a massive biotechnological pillar, pulsing with light, cables wrapped around it like veins. This was the Overmind, not a being. A machine grown from the minds of every Zarnak warlord. A collective consciousness, pure logic and brutality merged into a single purpose. Reed approached it slowly, weapon raised. Then it spoke, not in sound, in his mind. "You are late." Reed froze. Morgan raised his rifle. "What the hell is that?" The voice was cold, familiar. "We expected your arrival. It was necessary." Reed stared at the Overmind, his hands trembling. "Necessary?" he muttered. "You slaughtered children. To force your hand, to draw you here, to reveal your true masters." The room darkened. A new image flickered to life. Holographic projections of humans. Earth generals, politicians, council members. Reed's blood ran cold. The Overmind kept speaking. "They gave us coordinates, locations, civilian colonies marked for erasure, to stoke your rage, to drive your war, to distract from their plans." "No," Reed whispered. "Yes." The voice grew louder. "The humans you fight for sold you long before we struck. The betrayal you remember was not our design. It was theirs." Morgan's hand dropped from his rifle. "You're lying," he said, but the doubt was already in his voice. The Overmind pulsed again. More images, communications logs, signed orders, project files marked with Earth's own seal. Operation Catalyst. The truth hit like a hammer. Earth had known about Kesar 9. Not only that, they had orchestrated it, sacrificed human battalions to ignite public outrage, to justify expansion, to reclaim control over the outer systems by fueling hatred. Reed's war wasn't rogue. It was designed. He'd been a pawn, a useful weapon, pointed at the right enemies, burning the galaxy in the name of justice while Earth cleaned house behind the curtain. Reed stepped back, gun lowering. Everything, every fire, every death, engineered. His men, his squad, Morgan's family. Fuel for a bigger plan. Morgan looked at him, eyes wide. "What the hell do we do now?" Reed turned toward the reactor. "We finish it." He planted the charges himself, ignoring the Overmind's protests, its twisted promises of alliance, of vengeance, of power. "No more games," Reed muttered. "No more chains." The charges went live. Reed and Morgan sprinted back to the launch pad, fighting through the last wave of Zarnak defenders. Blood sprayed across the corridor walls. Explosions shook the facility. They reached the pod just as the core began to collapse. Inside the ship, hurtling away from the blast radius, Reed sat in silence. The chamber behind him flickered with heat warnings, systems failing, oxygen thin. But the Overmind was gone, and with it, the illusion. Back aboard Black Sun, the crew waited, silent, watching the feed of the spiral sector collapsing into gravitational chaos behind them. "What now?" someone asked. Reed looked up. "We show the galaxy the truth." He uploaded the Overmind's files, every last one. Earth's lies, the operation logs, the deals struck with alien powers. And then he sent it. To everyone, every system, every faction, every hidden satellite. He burned the mask off Earth's face. And then he sat back in the command chair, breathing hard, staring into the dark. He'd won, and lost everything. The galaxy didn't sleep for 3 days. The files Reed had unleashed, the full record of Operation Catalyst, the betrayal at Kesar 9, the engineered war, the death lists signed by Earth's own hands, had detonated across every comm network like a second supernova. News hubs didn't report the leak. They broadcast it, non-stop, unfiltered. Human colonies wept. Riots broke out on Earth's inner planets. Entire fleets in neutral zones stopped dead in space, unsure who they were fighting for anymore. And Earth's government, the council that had stayed silent, calculated, controlled, finally spoke. But they said nothing. Just a single message, looped over every channel. Do not believe the lies of a rogue terrorist. Earth stands united. But no one stood anymore. Reed sat alone on the bridge of Black Sun, orbiting a half-dead moon far from the flames. Morgan stood behind him, bruised, exhausted, both of them staring out into the void. They can't put this back in the bottle, Morgan said. Too much blood. Too many names. They won't try, Reed replied. They'll do what they've always done. Morgan nodded. Turn the gun around. Reed was now not just a threat. He was the threat, the one who exposed their rot, the one who dismantled the illusion piece by piece. Earth didn't want him dead because he was dangerous. They wanted him dead because he made them visible. The message came within hours. A cold, official broadcast from an anonymous Earth relay. Commander Reed, you are hereby charged with treason, terrorism, and the endangerment of humanity's strategic future. Surrender, and your crew will be granted clemency. Morgan stared at the screen. That's rich. Reed didn't move. They're going to send everything they've got. And when they fail? Morgan asked. Reed didn't answer. He didn't know. They couldn't run forever. Supplies were thinning. Half the fleet had scattered, some out of fear, others out of principle. Even the forgotten had begun to fracture. Men who once fought beside Reed now questioned what it had all been for. Justice? Truth? Or just more war and Reed? He wasn't sure anymore. The burn of vengeance that had fueled him was gone. Krev was dead, the Dorians broken, the Zarnak overmind destroyed, the lies exposed, and yet the war remained. Aboard Black Sun, the silence grew, until one night a signal pierced the void. Not Earth, not Dorian, a private transmission. Secure, untagged, from a civilian colony. New Thera, a deep-rim settlement unaffiliated with any faction, made of exiles, survivors, farmers, and soldiers who had walked away from every side. Reed listened in silence. Commander, you don't know me. I don't expect forgiveness for what you've seen, but your war gave us space to live, to breathe. We owe you that. If you need a place to rest, you've got one here. Morgan looked at him. It's a trap. Maybe, Reed said quietly. But maybe it's the first honest offer we've had. They set course, not to fight, to breathe. New Thera was rough, rocky terrain, hard winds, thin air, but it was real. No satellites, no fleets, just people trying to survive the mess others made. When Black Sun landed, no guns greeted them, just eyes, wary, curious, some familiar. Children ran to the edge of the landing pad. Farmers stood still, gripping tools like weapons. One old soldier saluted. Reed stepped off the ramp. Not in armor, no weapons, just a man. A woman approached, gray streaks in her hair, scars on her hands. You're the one who burned the lies, she said. Reed didn't reply. She nodded. We've been waiting for someone to say it out loud. They didn't throw a parade. They offered food, water, shelter, and silence. For the first time in years, Reed slept without dreaming of fire. Days passed. He helped rebuild a water system, fixed broken comm towers, taught some kids how to spot satellite sweeps. Morgan worked the fields, laughed, for the first time in a long time. But peace was never going to last. One morning, the sky cracked open. 3 Earth destroyers in orbit. No warnings, no negotiations, just a broadcast. "This is Captain Harland of the Earth Council. Commander Reed, surrender or we open fire." New Thera had no defenses, no cannons, no shields. Reed stood at the edge of the settlement, hands still covered in grease from a broken engine he'd been fixing. Morgan appeared beside him. "You know what they'll do." Reed nodded. "They'll make this another Kessar." He turned to the people behind him, the ones who gave him something he didn't know he still needed. A place, not a mission. A place. Then he activated his old comm channel. "Captain Harland, this is Reed." Static. Then a cold reply. "I'm listening." "You want me?" Reed said. "Then come down, alone. We talk." A long pause. Then, "No tricks." "No tricks," Reed said. The shuttle landed an hour later. Harland stepped out. Tall, sharp-eyed, Earth Council uniform, stiff and spotless. He looked at Reed like one might look at a bomb. "You're supposed to be dead," Harland said. "I was," Reed replied. "You just kept sending reasons to wake up." Harland looked around. "This is where you end it? A rock with no power?" Reed shook his head. "This is where I start something else." "You exposed the truth," Harland said. "Fine, it's out. But you've made humanity vulnerable. The Dorians will regroup. The Zarnaks will return." "Then fight them," Reed snapped. "But not like this. Not by lying. Not by using your own people as pawns." Harland crossed his arms. "What do you want? Amnesty? A monument?" Reed stepped closer. "I want you to leave this place alone. Leave these people alone. Forget me. Forget them." Harland studied him, then nodded once. "No fleet will come here," he said. "But if you ever raise your voice again—" "I won't," Reed said. Not because he was beaten, but because he was done. Harland returned to his ship, and the destroyers vanished. Reed walked back to the settlement. Morgan was waiting. "That it?" Reed nodded. "That's it." He looked up at the stars, the same stars he'd fought under, bled under, cursed under. And for the first time, he didn't feel like burning them. He felt like letting them be.